Good afternoon to our friends in Facebook land. We said we were going to be here at 1 o'clock, and we had some technical difficulties this afternoon getting our first Facebook Live show ready to go for you guys. So we're excited to start this show this week, and we'll be here every Tuesday afternoon at 1 o'clock. Hopefully it'll go a little bit smoother from now on. My name's Holly Kessler. I'm the Senior Director of Community Relations for Crossnore, and I'll be your host each week. This week, I'm super excited to have our CEO, Brett Loftis, joining me to talk about Crossnore, our mission, some of our programs, and some ways that you guys can get involved. So hope that you'll stay with us for the next few minutes and learn more about Crossnore. And here's Brett. So I'm going to let you introduce yourself to our friends in Facebook land. I think you might be on mute, Brett.
Small issue there. Hello, everybody. My name is Brett Loftis. I'm the CEO here at Crossnore Communities for Children. It's great to be with you today.
Thanks so much, Brett. I know that there are a lot of our Facebook followers and friends who know a lot about Crossnore, and then we have a lot of new followers that don't know as much. So why don't you tell us a little bit about our mission as an organization, kind of how long we've been around, and whatever else you want to tell us.
Sure. So it's pretty unusual to get to talk about the history of an organization that is as long as ours. So our campus in Winston-Salem started in 1909, and our campus in the mountains in Avery County started in 1913. So well over 100 years, we have been a sanctuary for children. And that has remained consistent over that time. And we talk about meeting children wherever they are, what the current need of children in our society. And for us, really, it's about home. And it really always has been for Crossnore, is for children either that did not have a home or did not have safety at their home. That's what we are. So we provide that safe home for children on our two campuses, and those really specialize in our sibling groups and our older youth that are in foster care. And then all across the western part of the state in foster homes in the Triad and the mountains and in the Hendersonville, Asheville area, foster homes where children just need a place to be while their families are trying to get themselves to be a more safe environment for kids. So that sanctuary of hope and healing, you'll hear us talk about a lot, is really centered around home and providing that healing that kids need to really recover from the things they've experienced. Some of those things are pretty hard, and to really regain their hope and think about the future and think about thriving instead of just surviving.
Absolutely.
That's what Crossnore is.
And so as we think about home, how did you come to call Crossnore home, both literally where you live and also where you work?
Yeah, so my career, I started as a child advocate in a volunteer capacity many years ago as a guardian ad litem, and then eventually worked for the guardian ad litem program in Greenville, South Carolina, and then went on to, after a brief stint in youth ministry, to law school at Wake Forest to be a child advocate attorney. And I did that work for 13 years. After law school, moved to Charlotte, became a child advocate attorney representing kids pretty much wherever there could be a time when a child would need a voice or someone to speak on their behalf. That's the work that I did, and eventually ran a nonprofit law firm and child advocacy organization in Charlotte. And about 10 years ago, just started really feeling a call to work with children and families, maybe closer in to where their problems were lying. So in the courtroom, you're often seeing the end of a series of bad events. And the court has some things that they can do, but they're not about healing necessarily.
Right.
And so I learned about Crossnore and got the opportunity to come up here and visit, and we fell in love. And we have been here almost 10 years. This winter will be 10 years.
That's amazing that it has already been 10 years. I can't believe it. As you talked about healing and certainly talked about your background as a child advocate in the various ways that you've done that, you, I know, have come up against a lot of kids that need that hope and healing because they've experienced so much trauma. So can you talk to us a little bit about trauma and the trauma-informed care that is provided through Crossnore?
Sure. So when I started my career, trauma was something only people talked about in the context of emergency room, a car wreck or something like that. And since then, the research and the brain science around traumatic events and how they impact our development as children and eventually impact our health as adults has really exploded. We know now that there's strong predicted likelihood between negative life outcomes and early childhood adversity. And so what we also know is that the brain is a miraculous creation, and it is really created to heal itself with given the support and proper environment. And so a lot of what we do at Crossnore is trying to provide that opportunity to let children heal from the things they've experienced. And that involves everything from how we talk to children and their families, the environment that they live in, the therapeutic supports we provide them. Sometimes that is clinical therapy, could be medication, it could be other experiences. And then really just those things that make us whole people, like arts and culture and pets and animals and work and the ability to travel, all those special things that kind of make us who we are as individuals. Those are also things that we really believe that every child deserves.
And so you talk about this almost as if it's a model. So is that a model that we follow, and is it a particular one?
Sure. So yeah, about 15 years ago, we really started digging into national models around trauma-informed care and landed on the sanctuary model as is really the place where we started and have been nationally certified 3 different rounds of national certification of being a trauma-informed organization. And over the years, really, we took hold of that internally, and it became part of our ethos and who we are as an organization. And so we started really continuing to develop that idea and to embed and embody all that work we knew out there in the science of trauma and resilience. And have built something pretty special here. And people come from all over the country to look and see what we've done and how we help kids heal.
And it is one of the things to me that makes Crossnore such a special place. And I often tell people that Crossnore's not perfect. We're made up of people, and people aren't perfect. But it is probably the healthiest place that I've ever worked. And I think that is because of our model and because of our commitments to things like open communication and nonviolence and shared governance. And those make a difference in the culture.
Yeah, and that's important, Holly, to recognize just what you said, is that organizations are just people.
Right.
And everybody brings their own baggage to work every day. And a lot of us in the helping professions have an extra amount of baggage. So on average, statistically, people in the helping professions have higher childhood trauma or childhood adversity scores than the average population. And what that means is that we have a lot of wounded healers out there, people who are also in the healing process while they're helping other people heal. And to acknowledge that is really critical and beautiful. To know that somebody could have a hard experience in their life, and that experience could make them a better advocate for the children and families in front of them.
And I think even for organizations that maybe aren't involved in child welfare, because people will ask me a lot of times, like, but how would trauma-informed care work, if you owned a restaurant or something? And one of the things that I learned early on from you, Brett, and working is just like in dealing with employees and looking at the difference between somebody who's made a fatal mistake and, may need to be invited to go elsewhere, and a coaching opportunity. And we really look for coaching opportunities at Crossnore to help people be their best self.
Yeah, and you used a good example. You talked about kind of the service industry.
Yeah.
And so we hear a lot about people right now not being able to hire enough help, and they don't have enough support. And what I'd say is that our work environments need to be healthier places for everyone, no matter where it is. And so if you don't show up for your shift at a restaurant, you could just get fired and they'd move on and hire someone else, or they could kind of dig in a little bit and say, hey, what's going on in your life? What's happening? Not to make excuses for anyone, but help understand the things that people are facing. And then you build a sense of trust and safety with those employees. And then you get loyal employees who are doing their best work.
Yeah.
And that's really what we care about.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, tell us, I want to move on and talk about a couple other things at Crossnore, but this whole idea of, the brain science and the model and everything is super interesting. And so if people want to know more about that, talk a little bit about Crossnore's training.
Yeah. So anything you want to know about Crossnore, you can get at least an introduction from our website, crossnore.org. It's a great place to just learn a little bit more about us. And one of the things you'll see on there is our National Training Center, the Center for Trauma Resilient Communities. And that was really born out of our work to take our model and to develop it in a way that we could sustain it long term. So we're not having to necessarily bring in consultants or bring in folks from the outside. We're building our internal capacity to help people do better work for children and families. And so more and more organizations were calling and saying, hey, can we come see what you're doing? And they'd come out here and they'd visit and they'd spend a couple of days with us. And we did a lot of consulting and support. And that turned into a national training platform. The Center for Trauma Resilient Communities is really about helping helpers. And if you think of helping professions everywhere from nursing and medical professionals to schools and teachers, all the way down to any sector you can imagine, all wanting to make their workplaces more healthy, more resilient. Something we've talked a lot about in the last couple of years as a society is what makes us resilient. How do we recover from the things that have happened to us individually and collectively? And the center is really about helping organizations build those skills and embed and embody the things that we know that work at the organizational level.
Yeah. So if you want to know more about the Center for Trauma Resilient Communities, visit our website, crossnore.org, and there's some contact information and that kind of thing on there. And you can find out more about bringing that kind of model to your own workplace. But let's go back to Crossnore's mission for the last few minutes here. And I know that we have a couple of new programs. You mentioned foster care. That's sort of our big area where we work with children and families. But we do have a couple of new programs that are kind of new in the landscape of foster care.
Sure, absolutely. And, I think what we're known for is that safe and loving home, whether it's in our community foster homes or one of our campuses. But we also really know that there's families attached to every single one of those children that we serve. And so a couple of years ago, we really launched a prevention services division. Mm-hmm. And we're using a model called home builders, which is where you go into a home where the family might be struggling, and without intervention, they might lose custody of their children. The state might come in and say, the children are just not safe to live here. And so we'll get a call from a county that says, this is a family that's really struggling, and if we can't get them stabilized, these kids are going to come into foster care. And so our team of professionals go in and wrap that family tight and support them and help them overcome some of the hurdles that are getting in their way, whether it's parent training and support, or it's around housing and nutrition, or just around trying to make sure that they're dealing with their own mental health issues or maybe substance use disorders, and so they can get the help they need. And Home Builders is a national best practice. And we're one of few organizations that really have that model and have been trained and certified in that model. And so we're thrilled to be able to support those families, because a child is best served with their family if they can safely live there. And we really believe that.
Absolutely. And one of the most impressive national statistics from Home Builders that I ever read was that for families that go through the Home Builders program, 75% of the children remain in the home at the 12-month mark. And that is huge. Yeah.
Yeah. And we see that play out every day. And that really makes a difference in those families' lives for generations.
Yeah. Yeah. And then talk to us about our Bridging Families program.
So one thing, if you're not in the child welfare sector, this may be a little confusing for you, but just to know that most children who come into foster care live with a family member that may be connected to that family, or they live in what we call volunteer foster care. So a community foster home, those folks who raise their hand and say, yes, we'll go through the training and you can certify our home as a foster home, those are volunteers. So they don't get paid for that work. They get a stipend to help offset the cost of raising someone else's child. Mm-hmm. And so it's a huge sacrifice. And what we know often, unfortunately, the national stats are that people don't stay foster parents very long, and children often bounce around into foster homes for various reasons. And so that's really led us to develop a model called Bridging Families. And Bridging Families is a professional foster parenting model. And we've really learned through research and experience, looking around the country, who's doing some of this best work, and found that North Carolina just did not have a model for professional foster parents. And we worked hard internally and with some consultants and with the state of North Carolina to develop a model where we hire really well-trained parents who are really called to parenting. That's what they want to do. And we support them with expert support and guidance to help them parent children who may not necessarily have been stable in foster care otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
And the really cool thing about this program is that those professional parents, those bridge parents is what we call them, they also work with the biological family. And they help that biological family break down whatever barriers are in their way to reunification. And their goal was to try to, if at all possible and it's safe, to try to get those children to return to that biological family. And that kind of support really doesn't exist for a lot of families out there whose kids are in foster care. We are seeing some really incredible early results. We really think it has a lot of implications for the future of the child welfare system in North Carolina. And we're thrilled to be helping to lead that way.
Yeah, because is it fair to say that a lot of families whose children are in foster care certainly have challenges? They're not bad people necessarily. They've got challenges, and they often don't get the support they need to do the things that the court asks them to do to get their kids back.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one thing to tell people to do a list of things so that you can have your children return to you. It's really another thing to have somebody who knows the system and understands, walk alongside you and support you in that process. And honestly, that kind of community is what we all have, is what we all need. And so I think about who we would call in my family if we were having troubles with one of our children, or we needed support, or someone was sick, or someone lost their job. We have a great network of family and friends that we can call on, but not everybody has that.
Mm-hmm.
And building that community to support a family is critically important to their long-term success.
Yeah. Yeah. Another mentoring coaching, more mentoring coaching opportunities, yes, for sure, with even higher stakes, with the opportunity to affect bringing kids home sooner, that they don't have to spend years in foster care. Maybe it's months before they can come home. So absolutely. Yeah, that's amazing. Those two programs are two of my favorite things to talk about, just because they're so exciting. And like you said, we're seeing such good results here early on. What do you feel like right now is Crossnore's greatest need? A lot of people ask us, how can we get involved? How can we help? And, certainly financial donations for any nonprofit are important, but there are other ways as well.
A lot of things that stick with me is when somebody says, I'd been driving by one of your campuses or driving by the sign for years, and I never really knew who you were or what you do. And that always is like a little bit like a knife to the heart, because we do such incredible work that's so needed out there in the world. And for folks to not know who we are is, it's hard. So we need people to share the word and talk about Crossnore, send people to the website, bring them over for a visit to one of our campuses, help people understand that the families that are struggling, that we're supporting, need a community around them, and everybody has a role to play. Whether you're a tutor once a month, or you're a visiting resource for a child who doesn't have a visitor, or you do something more intentional like change careers and become a cottage parent or one of our bridging parents, or whether you're just making, a monthly donation to support the work that we do. Everybody has a role to play in helping the children in foster care in North Carolina, because really those children belong to all of us.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And how many kids are in the foster care system in North Carolina?
So at any given day, there's about 12,000 or so children in foster care, but over the course of a year, it's usually between 15 and 16,000 children. And 40% of those are 6 and under. Wow. And right now, about 2,500 of those children in the child welfare system are free and clear for adoption and waiting for their forever home. And so our adoption team is always out there trying to recruit families who are interested and open to having a child come be part of their family forever. As you know, my wife and I are adoptive parents, and adoption is a great blessing, and it doesn't have to be a baby on the way home from the hospital. We adopted a 16-year-old, and he became an older sibling to our 2 biological sons. And every child deserves a family. and every child deserves a forever family. And we really, really want that for all the kids we serve.
Absolutely. And we could talk for days for sure. But one last thing before we go, just thinking about those kids, you mentioned adopting your son at the age of 16, but what happens to kids that reach that magical age of 18, or even in the state of North Carolina, the age of 21? How does Crossnore help those kids as they age out?
So while our dream is for every child to have a forever family, that doesn't always happen. And we want for children to be prepared for adulthood. So really, even starting at 14, 15, certainly by 16, we are helping children transition to our independent living program, where they learn how to live on their own, how to take care of themselves, how to do things like cook and change the oil in a car and set up a bank account and manage their finances, all the things that you need to know as a young adult. Because most young adults now don't walk out of their parents' home at 18 and or become completely independent. People need more support than that. And so you can live, a young adult in foster care can live in one of our programs until they're 21, if they choose to. And then we follow them with intensive case management until they're 26. But once you're a Crossnore child, you're always a Crossnore child. So if you're 66 and you need support, coming back to your home, which is Crossnore, we want to be here to help you. And that's important for us.
And it's really important for those kids. I tell people all the time when I talk about youth independent living that my kids are in their 30s and they still call me. They'll call me from the grocery store and say, hey, how do I make such and such? So thinking about those kids that have grown up in foster care, who are they going to call when they need that kind of help? So that's a really important program too. So, well, thank you, Brett, so much for telling us more about Crossnore. Brett will join us again on other episodes talking about other things, and we'll dive into some of these subjects more in depth in some of the other episodes later on too. But we appreciate your time today. Again, check out our website at crossnore.org. Follow us on social media. Leave us a comment and let us know what you thought about this show. And we'll look forward to seeing you next Tuesday. Thanks so much, you guys.
Thank you.